And as we see Kennedy really take a look here and help us understand how and why it is that we are responding to communism, he's going to recognize that we can't just always use flexible response or economy or the space race to contain communism. We're also going to need to use covert operations. We're going to need to face down the Soviets when they confront us with things like the Berlin Wall, and ultimately we're going to have to deal with communism right here in our own backyard in Cuba. So let's just take a step back and see how Kennedy is going to do this. Kennedy takes power in '61 after the United States has already cut diplomatic ties to Cuba. Well, what's the big deal with that, you say? Why do we care about this, right? What's the deal? Well, if we take a look at this map right here, Cuba is this little country in red right here that I have my pointer on, and it's only 90 miles off the coast of America. So we have a communist country that is only 90 miles away from a democratic one. This means Kennedy has unfinished business, because when Eisenhower was president back in 1959, Fidel Castro, this guy right here, overthrows the corrupt Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista and establishes a new communist government. You can see him here in 1959. Here are the communists rolling into Havana, the capital of Cuba. You can even see Fidel Castro, his brother Raul, here as well as they move into Havana, as they are preparing to take power and make Cuba into a communist state. This is, by the way, a big deal because it's the ending of Cuba as an American protectorate. We have lost a colony, essentially, right? A protectorate that was in our own backyard, and we lost it to communists. So Eisenhower, when he sees this happen in 1959, and then Kennedy, as he takes office in 1961, he begins to try and fear that the USSR, right, they're worried about, is the USSR using Cuba to kind of spread revolution in Latin America? So Eisenhower says to the CIA, remember, Eisenhower loved covert operations. He used them in Guatemala, he used them in Iran to get rid of anti-American leaders, and he wants to do the same thing here in Cuba. He's going to say, yo, CIA, how you doing? Do me a favor. I want you to find me some rebels, some people who don't like Cuba and this Castro guy, and I want you to train those rebels up. Maybe you train them up in Guatemala or Nicaragua, these countries that we're helping out here, And then, after we train them up, you send them into Cuba, we invade, and the Cuban people will rise up and they'll throw off that Castro. They'll spark an uprising when we invade, and then boom, bada bing, bada boom, Castro's out of there, and we can get an American leader in. So Eisenhower authorizes this kind of CIA program to train these Cuban exiles, these Cuban rebels who've been barred from Cuba, and they call it the Bay of Pigs invasion. And Kennedy is behind this. Kennedy, when he takes power, says, you know what? I'm down with this. But the Bay of Pigs invasion was a disaster. It was a disaster. Here's what happens. We'll break it down for you. We invade in the Bay of Pigs, and when we do, the thing goes bad from the start. When we get there, when we kind of land here, right, what went wrong? You can see it right here. What went wrong? Razor-sharp coral reefs. We thought it was seaweed. The landing was delayed. It meant Cuban airplanes and Cuban Air Force planes could bomb the rebels who were landing. 2 ships that were sunk. They lost heavy equipment. And here's the big one. Kennedy, worried that the world would know we did this, says, let's not send the American Air Force to help. This means those rebels that land are going to get slaughtered. The Soviets have helped them out. The Soviets have allowed the Cubans to use heavy weapons and tanks from the Soviet Union. It's just a disaster. What it ends up having here is we have 1,511 American trained soldiers, not Americans, trained soldiers, versus roughly 75,000 Cubans, right? 5 planes are going to be shot down, including American planes. Boats sunk, 400 American trained soldiers are lost, 1,000 captured, and it's going to end up costing us $53 53 million, oh, I'm sorry, did I say million or did I say billion? $53 billion of food, baby formula, antibiotics to get those captured soldiers back. It's a fiasco. And what's even more important here is that the Cuban people, number one, don't rise up in revolution. They don't want to rebel. And number two, when it's revealed that we're involved, because it comes out, Kennedy can't deny that we've attempted to get rid of a leader of Cuba. We've tried to overthrow him secretly, using the military and the CIA to get rid of a leader. So you can't deny it anymore. Fun fact for you, we tried to kill Castro something like 6 times. He survived all the assassination attempts. That's not the only thing that happens either in terms of covert operations or Cuba.